Let's read some books, because we can. And I bought a bunch I haven't read yet, so we can sell all the ones we have copies of as well, and then we can buy whatever's from him. So there we go. Few remarks on basilisks and cockatrices. Why, you've got such big eyes, grandmum, asked the little girl with worry. Shriek! Shriek! Replied the basilisk. Grandmum, why do you say shriek, shriek? Asked the little girl with surprise. The basilisk didn't reply, but instead clamped its toothy venomous maw over the curious little girl and swallowed her up. Luckily, a witcher by the name of Eskil, oh my god, Eskil, really? Was wandering these lands in search of a Zoogle. The witcher was experienced and so knew basilisks only turned people to stone in fairy tales. He also knew it is best to avoid their venom. Eskil noticed the monster had recently eaten, and before anyone could say ready, stead, yo, he threw himself at the beast and cut it open with his silver sword. The basilisk's stomach opened up and the witcher saw the half-digested foolish little girl inside. Amazing. So apparently we didn't read the Wild Hunt, okay. A frail ribbon flickers across the sky, the rider's spectral silhouette barely discernible within it. Then the cavalcade contorts closer and closer, revealing more and more of their ghastly form. Now the buffalo horns atop their helms penetrate one's view, now the crest betwixt them, and now the skull-like face exposed beneath their visors. The rider sits astride skeletal mounts, bits of barding stuck to their sides like boils. A furious gale howls through the willows, their blades now glisten like unfailing stars in the black sky. The wind howls louder and louder. No, that is no wind. That is school song. Suddenly the nightmarish cavalcade twists once more, the hooves of its ghastly mounts churning the light of will-o-wisps hanging above the bog. At the head of the cavalcade rides the king of the hunt. A rust-eaten bassinet sways above a skull-like mask. Gaping eye sockets burn with a pale blue fire. Around him whirls a tattered cloak. A necklace rattles atop his rust-covered breastplate. Holes empty as the abyss stare out from it. Once they were filled with precious stones, but these fell out during his race across the skies and became stars. The king of the hunt laughs, his teeth rotten as the grave, snapping above the rusted collar of his breastplate. The blue flames in the eye sockets of his skeletal mask roar. Journey to the end of the world. Sirens, the harpies' distant relatives, are winged monsters found in the Skellige archipelago, most frequently on unpopulated isles, or in the inaccessible coastal areas of populated ones. According to the legend, they are daughters of the mythical winged giant Hraesvelg, or should I say Hraesvelg, something like that, who lives on the edge of the world and bird scales with the waving of his wings. Hraesvelg's daughters seek out the company of giants and often make their nest near their lairs. These creatures attack boats and ships from the air, tearing sails and rigging to shreds and rendering the vessels immobile. At times they will snatch men or cattle from the deck and drop them from great heights to their death. They also attack travelers trekking across isolated beaches. Wondrous world of insectoids. One is hard-pressed to think of a creature more hard-working and better organized than the Andragra, and bees and termites are no match for them in this regard. Andragra's best even humans when it comes to foresightedness and industry. In fact, the human race could benefit a great deal from following their example, resigning from the primitive and obsolete social structures of feudalism and adopting instead a form of arachnocommunism. In arachnocommunism, every individual has specific place and performs a specific labor for the common good. The roles are as follows: worker, soldier, and queen. Each comrade contributes to the necessary daily toil according to his special abilities and takes the common fund of wealth according to his special needs. Despite what you might have heard, the first golem was created not by a powerful mage or an elven sage, but by a simple dwarf from Maribor named Bonaventura Sesto, a brickmaker. The fateful act of creation took place over a century ago, when the persecution of non-humans was in full swing in Maribor. Elves and dwarves had been accustomed to bringing an epidemic to the city, though it was later discovered the outbreak had been caused by a man named Matteo, a barkeep's dog's body at a Golden Goose Inn. This Matteo was charged with both serving meals and cleaning the latrines, and would only wash his hands once a month, and then not very thoroughly. The rest, as they say, is history. The persecution of non-humans was limited at first to robbing their shops, arson, and the occasional beating, but the violence soon escalated into a bloody pogrom. As the city guard looked on without lifting a finger, humans murdered elves and dwarves during 3 days and 3 nights of slaughter, killing over 300 individuals, including the aforementioned Bonaventura Sesto's entire family. Driven mad with grief and thirsting for vengeance, Bonaventura molded a 10-foot-tall humanoid out of clay, and then carved the names of the slain non-humans onto it, along with a smattering of dwarven curses. Once finished, he slit his own throat, and when his blood splattered on his gigantic statue, it came alive and started walking towards the city. Bonaventura had his sweet revenge on the persecutors. His creation killed almost 500 humans, including the mayor and the entire city council, before the soldiers from the city garrison could take it out using their ballista. The Conclave's later investigation found that Bonaventura had possessed hidden magic talent. Though he had never had any training, the torrent of powerful emotions running through him at the time of his death flushed out his latent powers and created from them a new spell. After numerous alterations and improvements, one can now cast a spell without sacrificing one's life. Golems guard laboratories, libraries, and palaces across the continent. Fauna of the Northern Realms, Volume 1. What a wolf is, every man knows. Who hasn't heard them howling at nights, or seen their tracks in the snow come morning? Who hasn't felt a cold chill run down his spine when he catches sight of a pack of 5 of them hunting in the woods? These beautiful animals are treated by men as enemies, and not without reason, for they attack our flocks and will even kill our horses during times of deep frost. Yet they are noble beasts, endowed with great intelligence and displaying a strength of independence that no man can help but admire. Ghouls and Al-Ghouls. As for the genesis of ghouls, there are hypotheses aplenty. Some scholars claim these monstrosities rise from scoundrels who indulge in a taste for human flesh, and for this misdeed drew the wrath of the heavens down upon themselves. The gods punished them by taking away their souls, their minds, and their human forms. My experience have shown her that ghoul anatomy displays far too little in common with that of humans for this thesis to seem at all probable. Any and all similarity in appearance between ghouls and men, such as their somewhat kindred shapes, and the measures of their physiognomies, are pure matters of incidental circumstance. It thus follows that ghouls, like their vile cousins the Al-Ghouls, are post-conjunction creatures, that is to say, such beings as came to our universe in an abrupt cataclysm disrupting the normal laws of nature. The world underground. We hunkered down for the night in a cave so enormous. The light from our torches faded into the murky black without revealing any upper bound to it. For most of the night, all we could hear was the rushing of water, somewhere behind the wall of a cave. Yet after some time, it is hard to say how much, for we had lost all sense of where day ended and night began. We heard a sort of scraping noise, and then the sound of boulders shifting. The scraping turned to a roar, but by that time we were already on our feet and running towards the tunnel through which we had entered the cave. We did so none too soon, for the shifting had opened up a new passage in the cavern, which began to spew out hordes of small misshapen humanoids, neckers. Without breaking stride, I looked over my shoulder, and in the midst of the mass of midgets I spied the outline of a large black troll. Thus began our run for our lives. The peasants of the Tukarsh foothills say fiends are born of magic. For a time, witches cast spells on bears, causing them to mount boars, and the resultant offspring is neither boar nor bear, but has the makings of a fiend. Usually such boar piglets die of hunger, but they are at times found and taken in by witches. Raised on enchanted milk, they grow in strength, and soon enough, the milk is no longer enough for them. Now fiends, they start hunting and kill their victims, with the ferocity of a boar and the strength of a bear. Yet they remain ever true to their mothers, meaning the witches. The witches protect them from danger, answer their every summons, and aid them in all things. Naresen, son of Gunastad. When he awoke, he saw before him an endless swath of blue. On the horizon the sky merged with a glassy sea. The storm had passed. So had the longship and all its crew. He never learned how long he had lain unconscious in the lifeboat. The sun had scorched his skin in a purplish red and turned his lips to brittle parchment. He was overcome by a great thirst, but there was nothing on the boat with which to quench it. Had he been spared from so much, only to die now? No. Naresen was the son of a great Gunastad, and he would never give up. He had 20 springs under his belt when he embarked on this voyage. When was that? Long ago. Very long ago. Back when his friends still lived, when he still had his left hand, not the stiff stump, when his beard was still red and not streaked with silver. The drive for glory which had driven him from his family home had demanded a high price. Naresen had never given that a second thought, but now, alone in a lifeboat in the middle of an endless ocean, he felt tired. He wanted to once again set eyes on the farm on which he had been raised, to see the eyes of his mother who had lulled him to sleep with the tales of the deeds of the legendary heroes. Now he had become one of them. Now mothers would tell their sons about him. His greatest dream had become reality. He should have been happy, but he wasn't. Perhaps if he had known then what travails and hardship awaited him. Yet no man can know his future. One thing is sure, however, even if Naresen had known what horrors this life had in store for him, he never would have chosen another. He was the son of a great Gunastad, and he had walked the path of glory, from which one can never stray, no matter the cost. Winter was on its way, and the Lord once again started to think about what to do to oppress his people even more. One morning, at the crack of the cockerel's crow, he rode out into the village in a carriage pulled by 2 black horses. Oh, truly the most antagonistic thing that you could possibly do. With his trusted page at his side to act as a scribe, the earth was sodden and a cruel mud covered the road, so the Lord, not wanting to dirty his shiny new boots, stayed in his carriage and sent his page to do his bidding. When they arrived at the village, the page dismounted from the carriage, a paper covered in thick ink clutched in his hands. He nailed the paper to the first hut he saw, and since he did it with a hammer, a peasant boy named Reuben soon opened the door up to see what was the matter. The boy was 12 years of age and had a straw-colored shock of cow, licked hair, and a freckled face with ruddy cheeks. "Well, what do you want?" grumbled the page, looking at Reuben's shirt, which was covered in the same filth as everything else in the village. "Well, nothing, rightly," Reuben shrugged. "Thing is, sir, this here's me home." "Bring it inside it." The boy wasn't scared, and instead stood on his doorstep looking at a piece of paper. "So what's this, sir? A letter?" the boy asked. "Read it and find out for yourself," the scribe said, growing angrier, although Reuben didn't seem to notice. "I fear I can't, sir. Don't know how." "What the devil's taking you, scribe?" the Lord hollered. He was still sitting in his carriage and hadn't heard the conversation. Clearly he was growing bored. "The web says he doesn't know how to read." "Aye, guess he don't," Reuben confirmed and took 2 steps forward the carriage, his bare feet sinking into the muddy grey muck. "And he wants inside, do they?" questioned the Lord. "Where'd you reckon they'd learn a thing like that, my lord?" the peasant asked, perplexed, for he had always thought great lords like that must surely know everything. "So who in your village does know how to read?" asked the Lord, growing ever more irritated. "Not no one, my lord." "Scribe," the Lord said, leaning far out while leaning on his carriage door, "could you explain to me how am I to enforce my declaration on people who do not know how to read and write?" "I don't know, my lord," the scribe said, taking a step back as if he expected the Lord to jump out of the carriage and assault him. The fault was not his, but the Lord was in the habit of beating his scribe when he grew angry, no matter the cause. This entire story was pointless. The ways and manners of Skellige folk. One's attention immediately is drawn to the fact that their seemingly impoverished huts shine with cleanliness. The walls of the homes are usually made from pine and covered with a substance derived from sap which keeps out all manner of vermin. I believe it scares off insects as well, for I did not see a single one indoors during my entire stay in Skellige. The interiors of their huts are quite spacious and usually divided into 2 rooms. The first is used by the members of the household during the day and is separated by a doorway from the second, which acts as a bedroom and contains only simple wooden beds covered with linens that resemble sacks more than continental bedding. In the middle of each main chamber stands a large round table round which the members of the household gather to eat only once a day. This usually happens just after dusk, the time for their main meal. The supper is a hallowed event and is carried out in a nearly ritualistic manner. At its start, before the family members have even taken their seats around the table, the eldest of the family tears off a piece of bread and places it on something of a household altar, which occupies a place of honor in each Skellige home. This serves as a symbol of respect for deceased ancestors. At the end of the ceremony for the departed, the entire family sits down to eat. The eldest woman places a steaming bowl in the middle of the table. Everyone has their own spoon which they dip, one by one, into the basin of food. They most often eat porridge, over which they pour a gravy made from meat or fish. Curiously, immediately upon the supper's conclusion, the eldest takes the piece of bread set aside at the start of a meal and places it in a large amphora. As I later learned, when an amphora becomes full, it is filled with boiling water, and a beverage is brewed which in taste somewhat resembles beer, though is much weaker. Okay, Necronomicon, about time we read this. To think that man appeared on an empty world and gained mastery over it unchallenged is as foolish as thinking the world will cease to exist after man's passing. Before the first human set foot on our world, it was inhabited by beings superior to men in terms of wisdom, strength, and every other virtue. The beings I have in mind still exist in our present time, though they do not exist in a sphere available to human understanding. They occupy no dimension known to us. Where they live can best be described as a space between worlds. At times, one can sense their presence, through a sudden unknown scent or a strange feeling of anxiety with no apparent cause. A wind which blows in several directions at once is another example of their subtle manifestation in our realm. There exist various imaginings of what these creatures might look like, yet these have nothing to do with reality, for man is incapable of conceiving something which he has not seen even in his wildest nightmares. The greatest horror these beings bring comes precisely from their indefiniteness and lack of concrete form, yet it would be a mistake to think that a formless creature is necessarily harmless. The power they possess is sufficient to lay waste to a forest, level a city, or whip an entire scene to froth and waves. Today man is master of the world, but only for a short while. They wait patiently and will soon arise and regain their one-time glory. This is as certain as dawn follows dusk, and dusk then follows again soon after, to drown everything once more in darkness. Well, that didn't read nearly as fun as I thought it would.